Welcome to the Goddard Report. Comments made on the Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com are an expression of opinion only. Here is Jim Goddard.
My guest is Rafe Mair, former BC Cabinet Minister and Canada's longest-running #1 radio talk show host. Welcome to the show, Rafe.
Thanks very much, Jim. Always good to be with you.
I know you've been battling a chest infection. The bad air from the forest fires didn't help, but hopefully you're feeling a bit better now.
Well, I guess I'm getting there, Jim. We really got the forest fires where we live in Lions Bay. You know, it was just, it was unbelievable. We went for, I guess, a week or 10 days. Couldn't see Bowen Island, couldn't see Gambia Island, you know. And it's brilliant sunshine out. But there we are.
Yeah, and finally they got the Mars water bomber out there. I thought, what a shame, the world's best resource for putting out forest fires instantly sitting there.
Well, that's right. It is finally going, and we're seeing it's a lot better. There's no question about that, but it was pretty rough.
Rafe, the reason I'm calling is there's a rumor that the Prime Minister might drop the election writ this weekend, starting the election campaign months ahead of the October 19th date.
Well, if he's doing that, he's obviously doing it to avoid the Duffy trial or more of it than he can get, although it's starting in 2 weeks' time. Maybe that isn't the answer. I don't know, Jim. You know, one of the things I found talking to you and other people, I get a pretty good impression of what the federal election's like in certain parts of Canada, but I have a hard time getting a feel elsewhere. When I go abroad to, you know, read about Quebec and read Ontario and so on, I get mixed signals from there. So I don't know what is motivating Harper to go early, but I guess it's not going to get any better from now until October. I guess that's probably what he's thinking.
And would it have anything to do with the fact that the Tories have a very deep war chest, a lot of money to spend?
Well, it could be, except, excuse me, in the time to come, I suppose, every day that goes by, the NDP and Liberals will be able to put more in, too, although I don't know about the Liberals. I imagine they're having trouble collecting money right now, but I'm sure that the war chest has got something to do with it. I rather suspect, as usual, polls have something to do with it. There was this poll last week, you may remember, that said that Harper was the most popular or the best suited or whatever it may be. He may be going on that.
Well, yes, and I think part of the popularity is everybody received that child care check in the mail, not realizing that if you're over a certain income limit, they're going to claw it back at tax time.
Yeah, I know. That always is amusing, and to get to be my age, and I suppose there's some listeners my age. I can't believe if there are, but you find that things that you get clawed back just as fast as you get them. So no, that's quite right. I just don't know. That to me is just such crass bribery. But I guess maybe people like to be bribed. I just don't know.
And plus, you know, we know from research 25% of Canadian children live in poverty. Why didn't they, you know, triple that out payment and send it to the families that needed it most, because it won't be clawed back? Or are they counting on the clawback? Well,
I don't know, but I'll tell you this, Jim, you've hit upon what to me is the #1 national disgrace, and how we can, for the most part, live in relative prosperity in this country and have starving children around us is just utterly beyond me. And just to branch out for a moment, when I see what the judge said about our own Children and Families Act and the minister's behavior, and think, you know, here we are in BC, beautiful BC, and we've got kids that are being so badly mistreated that they're being given to a sex maniac, essentially, as a father as opposed to the mother. You know, when these things go on, I guess the older I get, the more I think about kids, and the more I think, you know, we just haven't done anything, let alone enough, to alleviate that terrible situation.
And that's the case where the mother complained to social services that her husband was molesting the kids. A judge ordered the kids to be protected, and yet they left them with the father.
Well, that was the case I was referring to, and what I find utterly impossible to believe in this, Jim, is why the minister hasn't resigned. Now, I guess standards must have changed ever since Gordon Campbell decided he didn't have to resign when he wound up in the slammer for drunk driving. But, you know, this is appalling. Here's a minister that not only has shown a lack of control of her own ministry, but a judge has just excoriated her Now, I understand she's a very, very nice lady. I don't know her, very fine person, and all the rest of it. It doesn't matter. The fact is, her ministry has failed, and she's the minister. And she should resign. There's no question about it. But I guess in this day and age, particularly with Christy Clark and people like that in charge, nobody has to resign anymore.
Well, too, and we had a case before this where an 18, 19-year-old woman committed suicide after bouncing through something like 60 foster families, and nobody tracked her. Nobody cared. And that's what the report on her death said. Nobody cared.
Well, I think that's the terrible part of it. You know, I'm going to be just a teeny bit partisan here for a second and go back quite a ways. I can remember when I was in government and what was then human resources. Same problems, Jim. You no question about that. We had slightly different things, a woodland school and so on and so forth, but the problems were there. And when Bill Bennett appointed Grace McCarthy, all of the people in the field thought, oh, my God, we've got this crass right-winger coming out. Well, I'll tell you, she's the best we ever had because she looked where the money went. She knew there were problems. She went where the problems were, and she solved them. Now, she was a hands-on minister. And it doesn't matter whether she's Socrat, NDP, whatever it is. She was hands-on. She knew this is a ministry. You couldn't operate from your office. And I'm afraid that that's been happening since then. People have been operating from their office. They don't get out in the field. The people they have in the field don't feel that they're properly led. At least that's the sense of it I get. And when you don't have good leadership, particularly in a ministry like that, you're bound to have a lot of trouble. And I think that this woman is bound under British parliamentary practice, having failed and certified as failed by the judge, has to resign, but she's not going to, obviously.
We'll have more with Rafe Mair right after this.
More and more people are looking to the internet for intelligent, riveting, and thought-provoking interviews. To advertise on the Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com, call 604-699-8600, 604-699-8600.
In Goddard we trust.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Rafe Mair. Rafe, what do you think are going to be the major issues in the election campaign from Ottawa?
Well, you know, I get the sense it really is going to be a very personal thing. Now, a lot of issues will come up. A lot of the usual issues will come up. A lot of the ones that we've been talking about will come up. But I think essentially it's going to be, the way it looks to me right now, almost a two-horse race between Mulcair and Harper, and different visions and different sort of personalities. I think that's what the people are going to vote on. Now, of course, the press will say, "Oh no, they're going to vote on taxes, and they're going to vote on this, they're going to vote on the other thing, etc." And that's what the polls will show. But I just got a feeling that deep down in the gut this time, it's a him or him situation, and we'll see.
I've seen tweets complaining that Justin Trudeau is missing in action. He's just not out there.
Well, he made such a serious mistake on Bill C-51. I think that he, when you lose the sort of the tail end of your party and they start grumbling and they're not getting money for you anymore and they're not really wanting to go out and knock on doors and that sort of stuff, and you get those kind of minor revolts, it's very, very tough at the best of times, let alone in the middle of an election, particularly when one opponent has got absolutely ironclad discipline in this party and has for a long time, and the other one has become extremely popular, not only with his party, but with the people. So I think Trudeau I don't see how he can recover the ground.
I know when Jack Layton died, everybody thought the NDP would die with him. Mulcair has been a big surprise, I think.
He has been a big surprise, and he's been accepted by a lot of people. My wife and I were talking about this last night because we had sort of the same thing. What happened? Well, I think what happened is that people started to like him. They started to see him smile, started to see his family and that sort of thing, and they thought to themselves, they kind of like that guy. And that's a very good thing to have happen in an election. It's far better than the other way. And I think he's caught on. Now, it's a long time between the dropping of the writ and the election day, as you know, but as it stands now, I think he's in the race.
Has Rachel Notley's NDP victory in Alberta maybe changed the face of the NDP for the rest of the country?
Oh, I don't think there's any question about that. It's mainly been a huge morale booster for the party, but over and above that, people across Canada, I think, are saying, God, if the NDP can win in Alberta, maybe they can win. And people kind of like to vote for a winner, and all said and done. Not everybody, but a lot of people, they kind of gravitate towards somebody who can win. And I think that's done that for the NDP and for Mulcair particularly. People say, well, if I got, maybe this guy can do it after all. If not, they could do it in Alberta. Well, why not?
Yes, I know a lot of times the impression of the NDP is eat the rich. And I don't get that feeling from Mulcair at all. He seems to want a steady, kind of a measured thing where you don't want to upset the boat too much. And he also has to look after Ontario, where the labor vote, they still have people employed in car manufacturing and so on. You have to look at that. But again, they know if you get too radical, they'll just close the factory and move out of town.
Well, I think the NDP have moved towards the center anyway over the last 8 or 10 years. And I think that goes back to Layton's time and maybe even to Broadbent's time. But there's no question about it that that's where Mulcair stands. And when you stand as a popular leader of your party is going to go along with you. This happened with Blair in England. And I think you're right. I don't think that Mulcair is a radical person by nature anyway. I think he's a very practical person. But that's coming across, and that will, of course, annoy a lot of the hardcore left-wingers that we have here and other places, and a lot of them are good friends of mine. They'll be annoyed by that. But the average person that's looking to vote somewhere other than conservative, I think, is going to be attracted. Now, this gives me an opportunity to say something about the conservative ad. I think their ad about Trudeau, he's just not ready, etc., it was a brilliant ad if you happen to be the NDP, because a lot of people are going to be sitting back and say, oh, well, maybe he's right. Maybe Trudeau can't do it. I think we'll go with Mulcair instead of saying, oh, well, we'll stay with the Conservatives. So I think that ad has done a lot of good for Mulcair. It's made him look, people have looked at him a lot more closely, and what they see they like.
And I haven't seen any conservative ads yet attacking Mulcair.
No, and I think they'll be very, very wary in doing that. It's you got to be very careful with that. He's come across as a, now, I don't know the man, Jim. He could be an ogre. He could beat his kids, and I don't know what but I know he doesn't. But I mean, he could be any kind of awful thing. However, at this point, he looks very good, like a good husband, a kindly father, decent sort of guy, and so on. That's very hard to attack, politically or otherwise. You run a lot of risks, and I just don't know how they're going to deal with that.
And something, too, that's probably going to help the NDP in BC. Jenny Kwan, longtime NDP MLA, is going to run federally. Would she be a good voice because she's the face of the Chinese community in Vancouver?
Oh, I think she would be. And of course, Ida Chong is now running in Ontario, which is another big plus for them. The thing, though, that worries me about this, Jim, is that the NDP have just as ironclad discipline within their caucus as the Tories do. And, you say, well, it would be a great idea to send Jenny to Ottawa. Well, on the surface, you say yes. But my question is, would she have any more say than anybody else ever had? Would her influence be felt, or would it be just like, for example, our John Weston under Harper? Will she just be a cipher? I don't know the answer to that. It's a worry.
But we do know she's a hard worker, because I remember when the NDP was reduced to just her and Joy McPhail, and the two of them in opposition were the same as a full-sized opposition party.
Oh, they were. There's no question about it. And she is a hard worker, and she's got a lot going for her. I don't want to be misunderstood. I think that if she goes to Ottawa, Mulcair gets in, and he's looking around for good, solid cabinet material, that would be Jenny. I'm simply raising the problem that I see happening, that Mulcair has not yet shown signs of loosening the party discipline that I think has choked the Conservatives to the point that most people who have a Conservative MP, as we do, are wondering why we're paying them. So that's my worry. Other than, no, I think that Jenny is a great plus. Electorally, I think she's a great plus, particularly with the Chinese vote, but I think she is anyway.
What about the conservative ads where they're showing pictures of ISIS executing people?
That's to me, that was an awful thing to do, really. I mean, everybody knows that happens, but I think the point that was being made is, if you look carefully at it, they've really been violating their own C-51, and it's very close to it. I think those things are appalling. Now, maybe some people like them, but I don't like them at all. They don't inform me. I guess because, Jim, I don't watch violent movies or violent TV because I just don't like it. It turns me off, and I think those kind of ads turn me off. Now, whether I represent a large part of the Canadian population, I don't know, but I can't believe that those kind of ads really are going to be attractive, especially for a guy who's seen as an autocrat and as a guy who would probably like to be an ISIS guy if he had the choice. That's an unkind thing to say, but, he is a dictatorial kind of a person. I think that's kind of a dangerous ad in many ways for them to run, but, what do I know?
Well, what about the revelation that just recently in Kelowna, Harper was there along with the Premier taking a look at the firefighting efforts, and they brought frontline firefighters down off the mountainside, and Harper expected them to sing "O Canada" for him.
Well, that whole thing was disgraceful. It really and truly was. Now, I understand that when you get to be an old man like me, you think that everything that happened when you were there was better than it is today. But having said that, I'll say anyway, we had lots of forest fires, and I was in government just like every government does it. It just happens. And Bill Bennett was constantly asked to go up and, cheer up the troops and so on. And he said, no, these people are doing serious, dangerous work. All I'm going to do is distract from that. And there'll be photo ops that I don't need and they don't need. I'm not going near it. My minister will be around from time to time to cheer them up, let them know the government's with them, and do what he can to get help. But I'm not going to do it. And I think that was very wise. I think Christy Clark and Harper looked terrible doing it. It's what can I say? I mean, these guys are taking their lives in their hands every day, and now they're dragged out of the firefighting they're doing, still grimy, forced to stand in a line, pushed to sing "O Canada," as you say, and smile, which they didn't do, I noted, for these two leaders who are now dressed to the nines. The whole thing, I think, was just appalling, and I think that it indicates, actually, I think from Christy Clark's point of view, what's the only thing she thinks she's got going for her, she's probably right, and that's that she's good looking. God knows she isn't brainy. So, I think that this was just a serious mistake, and the Okanagan papers reported it as that, and I think they're right.
Right, the photo caption for the Prime Minister was, "Man in blue suit meets firefighters."
Oh, no. Well, those things, as I say, they just look so bad, and if you're going to do that, you best be a king or a queen or something like that and really do it up proud. But for an operating politician to do that, it looks terrible. And I thought, frankly, the looks on the faces of those guys told the whole story. I mean, you could just see they wanted the hell out of there as fast as they could, and why am I here? Most likely none of them supported the two people anyway. They felt like they'd been manipulated, and it looked that way, and I think the public would accept it that way.
Well, I have to say, Ted Chernecki on Global Television said, what is this, some kind of a propaganda thing here? We haven't seen any airplanes fighting the fire. All of a sudden, there's 5 of them as the Prime Minister and the Premier appear.
He had it right. I don't think there's any question but he had it right. And that usually happens with people who are, how can I put it, leaders of this caliber. That's exactly what happens. And it's, I like to say, I think the whole thing was disgraceful, and they should be ashamed of themselves. This is a very, very serious business. You've got guys and their families in jeopardy every single day of the week, and you haul them out for a political exercise and flash some planes at them all of a sudden and try to get them to sing "O Canada" and so on. I mean, far from being a morale builder, Jim, that destroys morale. And, you could just understand how they would feel. Now, when you're looking at a picture like that from Vancouver or Victoria, maybe it looks different. But if you're up in that area, and I have a lot of friends up there, have family up there, when you're up there living there, it just looked awful.
Well, too, if he would have come and said, we're announcing a national strategy to deal with forest fires, So, because right now provinces are on their own and they only cooperate out of necessity, but if you had a central center, you could predict where fires were going to happen because of the weather. You could put people in place and Ottawa would have a hand in it. Right now, there isn't that coordination.
Well, I'm not so sure I want Ottawa to have any more hands in things than they already have, you know. They have a habit of butting in and then making a mess of things by essentially being impossible to approach. It's rather like the Coast Guard, which of course is a federal matter, but I have the strong feeling that if it was a provincial matter, they'd be far better equipped and far more ready to respond to problems. You know, the feds usually come in with money and then mess things up. So I'm biased. You know, I was a health minister and I watched federal health ministers at work, and it left me with a feeling that while we needed the money, we sure didn't need them.
Rafe, thank you very much for chatting with us, and get well soon.
Thanks very much, Jim. Always a pleasure.
My guest has been Rafe Mair, former BC Cabinet Minister and Canada's longest-running #1 radio talk show host. You're listening to The Goddard Report on TalkDigitalNetwork.com. Find us on Twitter at TalkDigitalNet. Check out our popular YouTube channel, Talk Digital Network. Comments about the show can be sent to info@HowStreet.com. I'm Jim Goddard.
Comments made on The Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com are an expression of opinion only. The Goddard Report is available online and mobile at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. The Goddard Report is a production of How Street Media Incorporated.